All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're starting Unit 7, Learning Target 3, and dealing with how Europe and Russia are going to deal with their different types of little manufacturing, dealing with some of the money issues, dealing with how they're going to just kind of survive and what they're going to need to produce out of these areas. Now, one of the things that you see, tourism is a huge part of the economy of some of the Europe and Russia, especially Mediterranean Europe. In general, you're going to get your Mediterranean nations. They're going to be much less industrial than some of those other areas. A lot of their times they were dealing with fishing and agriculture. You're getting your olives, your grapes, your citrus, your wheat. There are a lot of different crops in there. In the 20th century, you're really going to get their economy to change. And it's going to go towards more textile industry, so that manufacturing industry. You get Spain as autos, you get Italy gets a lot of the clothing and shoes like you're seeing here. In the 80s, Greece, Portugal, and Spain all joined that European Union. One of your vocab words, getting together, making sure that they're working together in Europe. That's really going to help some of the other EU nations. They're going to try to get financial aid for them. Now, they still have a lot of problems. Some of the problems, like Italy's northern region, it's going to be much more developed than the south. They're going to be closer to like industrial Germany in there, as you're seeing on the picture here. The south made more of some of the bad choices, so that hurt a lot of the people and some of the things that they were able to do. Now, one of the things that this region has to do is it has to rely on a lot of imported oil. And if you're relying on imported oil, you're not going to have good energy supplies unless you can get that oil in there. But that's going to cost you a ton of money to get those in there too. Now, as we go towards Western Europe, there's a ton of dairy farming. Oh, there's some cows right there. That one on the right, kind of cute. I know you guys are checking it out. A lot of the different things is they're doing a lot of the export products in there. A lot of the agricultural products are going in there. You got your wheat, your grapes, your vegetables, some of those things in there. Now, the other thing you're seeing is, that industry. You're seeing a lot of coal and iron ore in here, as you're seeing on there. You're seeing that all over the place. Now, your high-tech and service stuff, when you're going your trains, your space programs, your nuclear energy, you're doing a lot of scientific instruments in there. Now, France also has one of the largest passenger trains. Now, we looked at the channel in my class yesterday, going through there, being able to go from London to Paris, but they also move some of these trains just to move goods through other places also. Because of the scenery and kind of the mild climate, you get a huge tourism area, as you were seeing there. You get a lot of Swiss watches, your gourmet foods, your German cars. A lot of people love and really fall in love with some of the items that are sold there. Like, look at that car right there. Now, you make it big. You could buy one of those for Mr. Bauman and I. They have a lot of their fashion clothing. You get the high. A lot of people go over to Western Europe for some of that. So if you're looking for that career, that's a good thing for you. Now, one of the things that happened is, as these areas tried to unify, you try to get those items coming into different places. The problem is, if you're having trouble, end of World War II, Germany was having some problems with their economy and is still struggling to a degree with some of their economy. Germany produced only about 6% of the world's exports, which is a low number for an area that size. Now, Northern Europe, pretty decent, but kind of varied economy. If you look at your notes on here, you're getting your industry resources, your natural resources, your high-tech information, your computer software stuff. You're getting a lot of manufacturing industry with your vehicles. You got your aerospace, when you're talking about space programs and things like that. You have what you're seeing here. As you were seeing some of those pharmaceuticals, a lot of those are coming from those northern European areas. Fishing is a huge industry right now because you have many different places and many different bodies of water that you're able to use. Now, the computer software and hardware, that's been huge in places like Ireland, Scotland, things like that. So you're looking at this Silicon Glen. This is one of those really high-tech companies. The world is relying a lot on some of those areas right now just to get some of that software and some of that hardware that people have. Now, most of these places have joined that European Union, but they don't. The problem is they don't want to give up their own money because you're devaluing your own. So we try to do something and to create something normal or for all of them called the euro, which you're seeing some of them there. If any of you have ever traveled over to Europe, you know you have to deal with the exchange rate, but at least that gave them a chance to work together on their economy. Now, some people really fear that if they give up their own economy, that they're going to lose their identity, but that's not always the case, and we need that. Now, the areas you're looking at here now, you're looking at some of Eastern Europe, and a lot of Eastern Europe is going to be those farming regions. Now, sometimes when you have this, you know, and what you saw in Eastern Europe is in the old days, you saw a lot of unemployment, as you're seeing people right here, because they couldn't keep up with some of the technology as some of the other nations. So they were having to play catch up the whole time. Well, what's going to happen is you're going to lead to inflation, which is a rise in prices for things. You're going to have closing of factories. You're going to lead to unemployment. So that's going to be hard. Now, that market economy is one where the industries make goods that consumers want to buy. Now, that can be really good, but what if the people don't want that? You know, if the people don't want that, that can lead to the closing of factories and things like that. And the first thing they're going to do is they're going to cut their costs. Well, you cut their costs, you're going to cost people a lot of jobs, and that's going to be hard for that area. Now, if you go to what are the 3 lingering problems in Europe's economy, you just look. If you don't have money, you're not going to be able to have some of the newer items that you have. So you have old equipment, lack of resources, shortage of educated workers. So if you have shortage of educated workers, you're not going to be able to advance in there. Now, the other problem is you don't have people. If you don't have a good work source, you're not going to have a lot of people in there that can afford to help. Now, what you're seeing on the top is what that leads to then is civil wars, because people get angry. Well, they start to fight, and that's what you're starting to see in a lot of parts of Eastern Europe is they were starting to fight in a civil war because they were very, very upset about their current situation. Now, we're going to switch gears, go to the European Union if you're looking at that map right here. Now, you wanted that European Union so that these areas stop fighting. They want to be able to support themselves. They want to be able to support each other, and they want to help each other. Now, what you're seeing here is the production of coal. Okay, now coal and like steel, things like that, are huge because you need them for the guns and tanks and things like that, but also for other products in there. But those are 2 huge things that people could make a lot of money on. The other thing the leaders were hoping is that if you got countries that have to depend on each other for their economy, then they're going to get along a lot better. Now, sometimes that happens well. Sometimes that does not happen well, though. That's the problem. So the EU now has 28 member states, so they've come a long way. Think of our classroom. The problem with, say our classroom has 28 people. Well, not all of you like math, not all of you like social studies, not all of you like science, so you all have your likes and dislikes of what you have, but you all have to get along and be able to just function as a class. Well, if you don't function very well, you're not going to go very far. It's not going to be a successful class. That's the same problems that the EU has to go through too. They've got to keep everybody happy in there. You know, their common goals are pretty simple. Improve their living conditions. Well, who doesn't want to improve their living conditions? They want to keep peace and security, so you wouldn't have to spend as much money on weaponry and things like that. They also want people to have individual rights and freedoms, so they want to protect. Now, that's a lot of what we do in the United States, too. We try not to discriminate. We try to give equal opportunities, especially towards women right now, right? With new pay raises, we're constantly trying to tweak our system to make sure it's better for everybody in the United States. Now, the European Parliament has to make a lot of laws to help them try to work with that European Union just to make sure everything's good. Very, very similar to ours, you know, and that euro, their hope is that that euro also brings them together because it takes away that individual, each country being individual, and makes them work together. Now, one other thing that they'll do, they'll have different people from different countries that are part of the EU. They'll go to school together, they'll work together, so they really are trying to break through, you know, and get new technology for people. They want to make sure that they package it with EU packaging so that people know that you're getting EU goods too. So they're trying their hardest to make sure that it works. Now let's shift gears to Russia, where we're describing the results of privatization in Russia. Well, if you privatize, that means that you're going to keep it to yourself. Well, what's going to happen then, you get your businesses that where the people aren't able to pay their bills because they're not profitable. Well, what was happening is those individuals, or these new businesses, would start go in. Well, these private companies, if they can't pay their bills, it's going to hurt because now the individuals that are working for those places, they're not going to get paid. So the leaders would have to offer vouchers, which is kind of, here, you take this and you buy a business. Well, if that business fails, you're going to create an economic crash. Okay, like it did happen in 1998. If you're not making any money, and you see that in the United States all the time. Okay, if people can't pay, well, you're going to have homelessness and you're going to have this economic crash that causes a lot of heartache for a lot of different people in these areas. Since the 1998 crash, though, their economy has been getting much, much better. They're trying to give a better benefit to most Russians. You know, a lot of Russians do still live below the poverty line, but it is slowly improving going through here. Now, because of that crash and because of some of the way it ran, you have something called distance decay. Okay? All that means is officials far away refuse to carry out reform programs. Well, that's a huge obstacle for Russia. You know, because one of the things that's happening, you have a lot of different governments going through Russia. Well, how do you get any unity going through? Look at all the separation on your screen right now. Okay? How do you get those people together? And because the central government's been weak, those people that are really far away from the capital, they're not listening to their government. Well, how do you force them to listen to the government? You know, so what happened is Mr. Putin has decided that I'm going to try to get the heads of the federal districts to force these people to do it and make them carry out their reforms. The problem is you still have to try to get people to listen to it. And that distance, because Russia's so huge, is tough. Now, the guy you're seeing in the upper right of your screen is another. He's a mafia guy. Now, they're having a lot of problems with organized crime or mafia. Well, if you have an honest business and mafia comes in and says, we want a cut of what you're making, well, how much money can you really make if the mafia is going to control that? So the mafia comes in, they demand a certain percentage of what you're making, and that makes it very, very tough. Now, it is illegal, okay, for the mafia to do that, but they are a very, very powerful source in that Soviet or in that Russia right now. And so you try to get officers, you try to get a task force going to try to stop some of this, but it's a pretty difficult task to be able to get them to stop that. Now, even with some of those problems, Russia's still really trying to come to terms with it and get it under control. And hopefully they're able to do that just so they can advance. Now that, ladies and gentlemen, is a very, very, well, sometimes windy, sometimes long version of Learning Target 3.